The Galactic Academy was known for discipline, silence, and perfect order. At least that's how it used to be, before the predator cubs arrived. Every hallway now echoed with low growls and scraping claws. Alien cadets whispered about the beasts in the lower barracks, the ones who refused to obey even the strictest orders. But strangely, there was one person they always listened to. Cadet Mira, a human girl barely in her second year. She wasn't powerful, tall, or armed. She was soft-spoken, always calm. Her eyes carried warmth instead of fear. And somehow the cubs, those wild, fanged creatures, obeyed her. No one understood how. The cubs were from the Varkathi species, born hunters whose instincts could slice through steel. Their parents fought in wars. Their kind respected only dominance. Yet these cubs, still young but already deadly, would sit quietly beside Mira, tails flicking in rhythm as she spoke to them softly. Security officers watched from the shadows, confused and uneasy. "She's taming them," one guard muttered. "No," another replied. "She's doing something worse. She's teaching them trust." Every day Mira visited the cubs' enclosure. She would bring them synthetic meat cubes, toss them into the air, and laugh as they caught them mid-jump. When one growled too loudly, she raised a hand, and instantly, silence. Not even their trainers had that kind of control. They had names now. Reth, Vura, Kex, Doro. Each one different, yet all loyal to her. To everyone else, they were monsters. But to Mira, they were her family. Then came the message that shattered everything. The Academy Command received orders from Central Command. No, human personnel are permitted to interact with predator species. All existing programs must be terminated immediately. The reasoning was simple: risk. Too much unpredictability. Too much danger. So, early one cold morning, Mira woke up to the sound of heavy boots marching down the hall. She peeked through her dorm window and saw armored security troops, 6 of them, heading toward the training field. Her stomach twisted. She ran. By the time she reached the enclosure, the cubs were already restrained. Thick energy bands held their legs and necks. Their howls echoed through the air, high-pitched and panicked. "Stop!" Mira shouted, running toward them. 2 guards blocked her path. "Cadet, step back! They're not dangerous," she cried, "and they're scared." The lead officer, his armor gleaming under the sun, didn't even look at her. "Orders are orders. They're being transferred to a secure facility." Reth, the largest cub, tried to fight. He lunged against the restraints, teeth flashing, claws slashing through metal. But the more he struggled, the tighter the bands became. His cry wasn't rage, it was pain. Mira felt her chest tighten. She pushed past the guards, desperate, screaming his name. But another officer caught her by the arm and dragged her back. "Don't interfere," he barked. She tried to pull free, tears blurring her vision. "They won't understand why you're doing this. You're terrifying them." The officer hesitated for a moment, just a second, then turned away. The cubs were loaded into a transport cage, their eyes wide and glowing with confusion. Reth let out a low growl, then tried to reach his claw through the bars toward her. His voice broke the silence, trembling with emotion. "Man," he said in broken standard. It was the first word he had ever spoken. Mira froze. The guards stared in disbelief. Even after everything the cubs had learned from her, her language. But before she could react, the transport sealed shut. The cage lifted into the air, carried toward the northern sector where the secure facility waited. Mira fell to her knees as the hum of the shuttle faded into the sky. The air felt heavier, colder. They were gone. That night, the academy fell quiet again. Too quiet. Cadets whispered about what had happened. Some said the human was lucky not to be expelled. Others said she had lost control of her pets. But those who passed the predator enclosure stopped for a moment. The place felt hollow, empty. Mira sat in her dorm, staring at the wall. On her desk lay 4 small collars, the ones she'd made for them out of recycled fabric. She used to joke that it helped her tell them apart. Now they were all she had left. Outside, thunder rumbled, and somewhere, Deep in the northern sector, inside reinforced containment units, 4 cubs lay restless. Their breathing was heavy, their claws twitching. Reth lifted his head, sniffing the air. He could smell her, faint, distant, but still there. He growled softly to the others. "We find her." The others stirred, tails flicking. The youngest, Vera, whimpered. They said, "Human gone." Reth's eyes glowed red in the dark. "Then we go." He slammed his claws into the wall. The alloy dented. Once. Twice. Sparks flew. They remembered her voice, her touch, her promise. "No matter what happens, I'll always come back." But now it was their turn. At dawn, alarms shattered the Academy's silence. "Containment breach!" shouted a voice over the intercom. The guards rushed toward the security wing, weapons drawn. But by the time they arrived, it was too late. The walls were torn apart. Security drones hovered uselessly in smoke-filled corridors. Scorch marks and claw trails lined the floors. The cubs were gone. One of the guards found a single word carved into the steel door, a word written clumsily, but unmistakable in human letters: Myra. The Academy fell into chaos. Every cadet was ordered to their quarters. Patrol drones searched the campus. Commander Vrax, head of security, slammed his claws on the control table. "How could they escape?" he roared. They coordinated." One technician stammered. "Sir, it looked planned. They attacked the power grid, the sensors, even jammed our signals." Vrax turned, his yellow eyes narrowing. "Cubs don't think like that," the technician swallowed. "Unless someone taught them." Vrax froze. His mind flashed to the human girl, the soft voice, the way they obeyed her. He didn't say it out loud, but he knew. They were coming back for her. Mira woke to a pounding on her door. A security officer stood outside, face pale. "Stay in your room, cadet," he ordered. "The predators have escaped." Her blood ran cold. "What?" He didn't answer. He slammed the door shut and locked it from the outside. Mira backed away slowly, heart pounding. Through the thick window, she could see red warning lights flashing across the campus. Sirens blared. "They're coming back," she whispered. "They're really coming back." And for the first time since they'd taken them away, Mira smiled. The sirens screamed through the corridors of the Galactic Academy. Every screen flashed red. Containment breach. Level 9 alert. Cadets rushed to sealed shelters while armed drones flooded the hallways. Officers barked orders, their voices shaking. No one had ever seen predator cubs escape before. It should have been impossible. But it wasn't. Because these weren't ordinary predators anymore. They were her cubs. In the command center, Commander Vrax stood in front of the holographic map. His tail twitched, claws tapping against the metal floor. On the screen, red dots in on the cubs gonna moved fast, cutting through security zones with terrifying precision. "How are they evading all barriers?" Vrax growled. "They're working together, sir," the technician stammered. "Using distractions, ambush patterns." "Like a trained unit," Vrax's eyes narrowed. "Who trained them?" The technician hesitated. "The human, sir. Cadet Mira." The room went silent. Vrax didn't answer. His eyes glowed faintly yellow, filled with a thought he didn't want to admit. The human girl had taught them strategy. Meanwhile, in her locked dorm, Mira pressed her ear to the door. The alarms had faded, replaced by distant thunder. She could feel it. The rumble wasn't from the storm. It was from them. The cubs were coming. She looked out the window and gasped. Across the courtyard, security teams stood in formation, weapons raised toward the northern sector. A plume of black smoke rose from the direction of the holding bay. Something massive had broken through. The air trembled again, followed by the deep, guttural roar she knew by heart. "Reth," she whispered. Mira turned to her desk. She grabbed one of the cub's old collars, the one with a small dent near the tag, and closed her fist around it. "They're coming for me, and I'm not letting them get hurt because of it." She ran to the door and slammed her shoulder against it. Once, twice, it didn't budge. Then she noticed the panel on the wall. Her eyes flickered with determination. She remembered something Reth had done once when trapped in a training cage, a sharp claw through a weak point. Mira pulled the fork from her meal tray, jammed it into the seam, and twisted. Sparks flew. The lock clicked. She slipped out into the dark corridor. Smoke rolled through the air. The emergency lights painted everything in red. The sound of boots and metallic footsteps echoed in the distance. Mira moved fast, hugging the walls, heart pounding. As she turned a corner, she froze, and a drone hovered nearby, scanning for life signs. Her pulse quickened. She crouched low, sliding behind a pillar. The drone's scanner beam swept across the hall, then faded away. Mira took a slow breath and whispered, "You taught me this. Reth, quiet, focus, move when they don't look." She slipped past the drone and disappeared into the shadows. In the storm outside, the cubs were closing in. Reth led the pack, his muscles rippling under soaked fur. Electric sparks flickered over his claws from the broken fences they'd torn through. His eyes glowed blue, intelligent, furious, determined. "Kex, left flank," he growled in their native tongue. "Vura, with me." They obeyed without question. Security mechs stomped through the mud, their weapons humming, targeting systems searching. The cubs darted between lightning flashes, moving faster than the sensors could track. One mech caught sight of them. It fired. Plasma bolts hissed through the rain. Reth roared, spinning aside. The bolt missed by inches, melting a tree trunk. Doro leaped from above, landing on the mech's head, claws tearing through the power core. Sparks burst in all directions as the machine collapsed with a metallic shriek. "Good," Reth grunted. "No killing." Even in fury, he remembered her words. "Never harm unless you must." Inside the academy, panic spread. Cadets huddled behind blast doors, whispering as shadows flashed past the windows. "Did you see that? It moved like lightning. They're heading for the dorm wings." Commander Vrack stormed down the hall, roaring into his comms. "All units hold the human cadet in isolation. If they reach her, sedate or terminate." But his words came too late. Mira reached the lower corridor leading to the hangar deck. Her shoes slipped on the wet floor as she turned a corner, and nearly collided with a group of guards. "Hey, you!" one of them shouted. She didn't stop. She ran. "Stop or we'll—" The sentence died in his throat as something slammed into the wall beside them with the force of a meteor. Metal tore like paper. Through the hole, 4 glowing shapes appeared, eyes burning in the darkness. The guards froze, terror filling the space. The cubs stepped through the smoke, dripping rainwater, muscles tensed. They didn't growl this time. They just looked angry. Reth's gaze locked onto Mira. His breath hitched. His body lowered in recognition. She took a step forward, trembling. "Reth?" He whined softly, his massive tail sweeping behind him. Then, in one swift movement, he closed the distance and nuzzled his head into her chest, almost knocking her over. The others surrounded her, circling protectively. Mira wrapped her arms around him, sobbing with relief. "You came back." Reth pressed his forehead to hers, eyes glowing with warmth. "We promised." The reunion lasted only seconds, because a cold mechanical voice echoed above them. "Target located. Engaging containment protocol." Searchlights cut through the rain. Dozens of security mechs emerged from the smoke, their cannons spinning. Mira froze. The cubs snarled, forming a line between her and the machines. A red laser dot flickered across her chest. "Don't move," barked a voice from the intercom. "You're endangering yourself, cadet." Mira's voice shook but stayed firm. "They're not dangerous. They're trying to come home." The officer shouted back, "They're predators, not pets." But the cubs didn't lunge. They stood perfectly still, tails flicking, breathing hard, waiting. Reth turned his head slightly toward her, his deep voice rumbling. "What do we do, Mira?" She looked around. Dozens of mechs, armed guards, drones in the sky. No way out. Her hands shook, but she stepped forward, standing in front of the cubs. "You do nothing," she whispered. "You let me talk." The commander's transport landed behind the front line. Commander Vrack stepped out, towering over everyone. His scales shimmered like armor under the lightning. He looked at Mira, then at the cubs behind her. "You've caused enough damage," he said coldly. "Step aside." Mira shook her head. "They didn't hurt anyone. You call this no harm?" he snapped, gesturing to the wrecked walls. "They destroyed 3 sectors. They were scared," she shouted back. "You took their family away." The rain poured harder, thunder shaking the ground. The cubs growled low, protective, their claws digging into the wet metal floor. Vrax's soldiers aimed their weapons. Mira raised her hands. Please look at them. They could have killed everyone here if they wanted to, but they didn't. They came for me. That's all. No one moved. Even the mech seemed uncertain. For a long moment, the only sound was the storm. Then slowly, Reth stepped forward and did something no one expected. He bowed. The massive predator, built for war, lowered his head before a human girl. The guards hesitated. Vrax's eyes widened. Mira whispered softly, "They learned that from us, respect, compassion, that's what your academy is supposed to teach." A soldier raised his weapon again. "Orders are orders, Commander." Vrax's tail flicked once hard. "Hold fire," he growled. The soldier froze. Vrax stepped closer, his eyes scanning the cubs, then Mira. "You broke protocol," he said. "And yet, they obey you better than any trained unit I've seen." Mira met his gaze. "Because I never treated them like weapons." Thunder cracked again. Finally, Vrax exhaled, his voice quiet but heavy. "Then you'll answer for their actions and all of them." Mira nodded. "I will." Reth growled low, ready to defend, but she touched his fur. "It's okay." Vrax gestured to his officers. "Stand down." The weapons lowered, Mira collapsed to her knees, exhausted. The cubs surrounded her again, curling close like a living shield. As the storm eased, the academy lights flickered back on. The courtyard was a ruin of shattered glass, smoke, and mud, but alive. Mira looked up at the dark clouds breaking apart, faint starlight seeping through. She whispered, "You found me." Reth rumbled softly, "Always." In the distance, Commander Vrax watched silently. He didn't say it aloud, but in that moment even he understood. These cubs were no longer just predators. They were something greater, something human. The storm had finally calmed. The academy courtyard lay in ruins, smoke still rising from shattered walls and torn cables. The smell of burnt metal filled the air. Mira knelt on the soaked ground, her arms wrapped around the predator cubs, their fur slick with rain. They were trembling, but not from fear, from exhaustion. Around them, dozens of armed soldiers stood in tense silence, unsure of what to do. Commander Vrax's deep voice finally broke through. "Contain them," he ordered quietly, but no one moved. The soldiers glanced at one another. The sight before them didn't look like an attack or a rebellion. It looked like a reunion. A girl and her cubs together again after being torn apart. Vrax stepped forward, his boots crunching against debris. "Cadet Mira," he said slowly, his tone controlled but sharp. "You defied direct orders, compromised security, and allowed dangerous creatures to escape containment." Mira lifted her head. Her face was streaked with mud and rain, but her eyes were steady. "They're not dangerous," she said softly. "They're just misunderstood." "Misunderstood?" Vrax's scales rippled as his tail lashed behind him. "They tore through reinforced walls and nearly destroyed an entire wing." "They didn't hurt anyone," Mira shot back. "They could have, but they didn't. You think they're monsters, but they came here because they missed me. Because they care." The word hung in the air, care. It sounded strange, almost impossible when said about predator species. The soldiers shifted uneasily. None of them had ever heard emotion like that spoken toward Varkathi cubs. Vrax lowered his voice. "You've risked the academy for sentiment." Mira stood, still holding Reth's massive paw in her hands. "No," she said. "I've reminded you what this academy was built for. Understanding, not control. You talk about peace between species, but you treat every creature like an enemy waiting to happen. Maybe the problem isn't them. Maybe it's us." The cubs stirred behind her, their glowing eyes fixed on the commander. For a long moment, the air was still in the calm after the chaos. Then, without warning, a mechanical whine filled the air. One of the damaged defense drones reactivated. Its targeting system flickered to life, Cowan locked onto Mira. A red laser point traced across her chest. Reth saw it first. His eyes widened. He let out a roar that shook the courtyard. The drone fired, a single plasma bolt slicing through the rain. Before anyone could react, Reth moved. He leapt in front of Mira, taking the hit square in his shoulder. The impact threw him backward. He crashed into the mud with a pained growl. Steam hissed from his wound. "Reth!" Mira screamed, dropping beside him. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his eyes dimming. The other cubs surrounded them, snarling and baring their fangs. Vrax barked orders. "Deactivate that drone now!" Soldiers scrambled, blasting the rogue drone out of the sky, sparks raining down. But the damage was done. The courtyard went silent except for Mira's panicked breathing. She pressed her hands against Reth's wound, her tears mixing with the rain. "Stay with me, you hear? Stay with me." Reth's voice was faint. "You safe?" "Yes," she whispered. "I'm safe." "Good." His breathing slowed. Then, "Worth it." Her heart broke. The soldiers watched in stunned silence. None of them had ever seen a predator, one of the galaxy's fiercest species, sacrifice itself for a human. One soldier whispered, "He protected her." Another added, "He took the shot meant for her." Even Commander Vrax was frozen. His eyes flicked from the dying cub to the girl crying beside him, and something inside him shifted. He had seen loyalty in war, but this was something deeper. Mira looked up at him, voice shaking but filled with fire. "You see now? You call them beasts, but they're more human than half the officers here." Vrax took a step back, his claws curling. His voice was quieter this time. "You're saying they learned this from you?" Mira nodded. "Not from me. From kindness. From trust. They're proof that even the most dangerous hearts can change, if you give them a reason." The storm clouds began to break. Light from the rising sun spread across the academy grounds, glinting off the broken glass and puddles. Reth groaned, his body shuddering. Mira pressed harder on his wound. "Hold on, please." Then a voice called from behind, one of the med techs. "Let me through." A small team of alien medics rushed forward, pushing through the soldiers. They knelt beside the cub and began sealing the wound with biofoam. The hiss of healing compound filled the air. Vrax turned toward his officers. "Stand down. That's an order." The soldiers lowered their weapons completely. Mira looked at him, surprise flickering through her tears. Vrax sighed, his voice heavy. "You're right. Maybe we forgot what this place was meant to teach." He looked at Reth and the others. If loyalty and mercy exist in them, then perhaps there's more humanity in the stars than we thought. Hours passed. The rain stopped. The academy staff began clearing the wreckage. Mira sat beside Reth as he slept under medical supervision, her hand resting on his head. The other cubs lay close by, their breathing calm and steady. Commander Vrax stood nearby, watching quietly. "They'll live," he said at last. Mira nodded, relief flooding her chest. "Thank you." He hesitated before speaking again. "I've reported the incident to Central Command. They want to label it a security failure," she frowned. "And what will you tell them?" Vrax's tail flicked once. The truth. That it wasn't a failure. It was a lesson, one worth remembering. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Cadet Mira, you may have changed more than you realize." Weeks later, the Galactic Academy began to change. New protocols were written, not to isolate species, but to connect them. Training sessions between humans and predators became a reality. The old restrictions were lifted, and on the northern courtyard where the battle had taken place, a memorial was built, a statue of a young human girl kneeling beside 4 cubs, her hand resting on the largest one's head. The plaque beneath it read, "They broke through barriers, not walls, but hearts." Cadets from every world came to see it. They whispered stories about the girl who defied orders, who protected monsters that became heroes. One evening, long after most lights had gone out, Mira returned to that memorial. She placed her hand against the cold stone, her reflection faint in the polished metal plate. Behind her, soft footsteps padded closer. Reth, now recovered and taller than ever, stepped into the light. His fur gleamed under the stars. "You're not supposed to be out of bed," Mira said, smiling. He tilted his head. "Neither are you," she laughed softly. "Fair point." Reth lowered himself beside her. "They talk about us," he said. "Call us symbols." "Maybe," she said, still smiling. "But I think we're just friends who refuse to listen." Reth looked at her for a long time. "You could have left." "Why stay?" Mira gazed at the stars above them, endless, bright, full of life. "Because someone has to remind them what we're fighting for." He nodded slowly, then leaned closer, his voice a low rumble. "Then we'll remind them together." As the wind swept through the quiet courtyard, the academy lights dimmed one by one, leaving only the glow of the statue and the stars above. Somewhere in the distance, young cadets laughed and trained, predator and human, side by side. Mira stood brushing the dust from her uniform and turned to go. Reth followed, his massive steps soft against the stone. As they walked away, their shadows stretched across the courtyard, one human, four predators, united. The stars reflected off the memorial's base, where someone had scratched a new line beneath the old words. They returned not to fight, but to remind us what it means to be human. And for the first time in years, the academy felt truly alive again.